if this becomes a routine habit where you're so worried about resolving conflict before you go to bed, you're going to create this habit of conflict needs to be rushed. And again, you're going to have made compromises that you wouldn't normally have made. You're not actually going to see things through. That's just not happening if you are rushing conflict resolution in order to beat the clock.
Hey, 1 Degree fam. I'm Nathaniel.
And I'm Zan. And this is the 1 Degree Podcast, where we talk about what it looks like to be married as followers of Jesus.
Look, we know that life gets full. Marriage, kids, work, church, sports, the list goes on and on. But we believe that a thriving marriage does not happen by accident.
Each episode will give you real conversations, practical tools, and biblical encouragement to help you connect deeply with your spouse and live on mission together.
So, whether you're folding laundry, driving to work, or maybe even working out, we're glad you're here with us.
Let's dive in. What is up, 1 Degree fam?
What is up, fam? Welcome back to the comfy, cozy, virtual leather couch. So happy that you are here with us today, where we are talking about advice that you've probably heard either from the pulpit, from a well-meaning relative, maybe from a marriage conference, a marriage book. And that advice is don't go to bed angry. And we're going to be talking about why that's overrated advice and that you should go to bed angry. I'm just kidding. We're not saying you should go to bed angry.
You should make it a point to stir up contention every night
before bed.
And then conk.
You sleep so much better when you're angry.
When you're
go
in
to
fight
bed.
or flight.
Yes.
It's great.
But what we're going to be talking about is why this cliche, like how did it develop, especially within Christian culture, and why at the heart of it, at the root of it, it may be kind of good thoughts or good intentions, but why it may not be the best advice. And so let's start by talking about where this comes from, like where this stems from. The idea itself typically stems from Ephesians 4:26, specifically the back half of this verse, but this verse says, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger," or on your wrath, depending on the translation that you have. And so a lot of times we'll latch on to that and take it in very literal of not letting the sun go down on my anger. So with my spouse, anytime there is frustration, anytime there's contention, anytime there is anger, or maybe a heated discussion, it's 11:37 at night and it's like, we are not going to bed until this is resolved. Because I think that basically the idea here, while good, is like, hey, you don't want to go to bed angry. You don't want to have, bitterness or resentment as you're going to sleep. But sometimes going to bed and revisiting the conversation later when you're well rested is the best choice. And that's going to be kind of what we're talking about. Because I think when you look at this passage in broader context, first of all, Paul here in the letter to the Ephesians isn't even talking about, husband and wife relationships. He's actually, in broader context, just talking about living a new life as believers and not kind of living in the way you used to live before becoming a believer. And so first of all, it's important to note that context. And he talks about a lot of things within this section. He talks about this idea of not darkening, therefore putting away lying, speaking the truth, put away lying, speak the truth to your neighbor, and then it comes into this idea of be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down in your anger. Don't give the devil an opportunity. Let the thief no longer steal. Do honest work. No foul language should come from your mouth. And so the broader context is talking about, hey, in Christ, you live a new life. That is the transformative power of the gospel in your life. And so when we're talking about anger here, number one, at the beginning of the verse, he says, be angry and do not sin. And so anger itself isn't always the problem. There is such thing as, being righteously angry at sin in the world, at injustice. Like there's a righteous anger, but our response to that anger is what potentially leads us to sin. And then when it says, do not let the sun go down in your anger, it's more It's more this idea of do not let this anger to fester. Do not dwell on it. Do not, really allow it to don't remain angry for long periods of time. And that's kind of the heart posture that we want to have in our marriage. Like our goal is not to allow anger to fester. Our goal is to reach resolution. And that's kind of what we want to aspire to rather than having a specific, okay, by the time we go to bed every single night, we need to make sure that we are not angry.
Yeah, I think of it, and this is not from a biblical scholar perspective, so this take it with a grain of salt. But when I think about this imagery of letting the sun go down, it's not this literal when sunset. I mean, in this case, if we're being really literal, this isn't don't go to bed angry. This is make sure all conflict is resolved before sunset. Like if we're really wanting to be literal with this.
What do you do when you have conflict when the sun's down?
Right. And then it's like, okay, I guess you get a like extra period there
Yeah,
because
you
you
do.
get that whole next day.
Yeah, the sunrise and the sunset.
So yeah, I would not say that this is supposed to be literal. I would say, hang on real quick because I'll lose my thought. It's this imagery of closure. It's like the sun going down is this closure of the day. And so it's this idea of like, do not let the ending of, I'm not saying your life, like don't die angry, though also true. I would say it's like, okay, if you're married and you are in conflict, and we're going to get into the nuance, like how this actually fleshes out, but it's like all things, Lord willing, you're both going to wake up tomorrow and be able, like, you haven't reached that point of closure. It'd be like, don't proceed with the next stage of going to work and like continuing out your days and separating, but like you are in bed together and you will have the morning to get like, it's obviously nuanced completely based on your circumstances. But I think it's this idea of don't close this little pocket of your time together angry.
Yeah, and I would say even beyond that, because you could say, okay, going to bed is kind of closure in a sense.
It's fair.
But I get what
But
you're
we're gonna
saying
get
in the
into
sense.
that.
So going to bed, and we'll get into this, isn't the end of the discussion. So if it's just like, oh, we're just done, let's just move on and let's forget about it and
Yeah.
let time heal.
It's a semicolon,
Like,
not a period.
Exactly. So that is the wrong mentality to have. Like
Right.
this idea of, okay, if we're just going to go to bed and then sleep it off and never address it again.
Which is, I think, what a lot of people do.
Exactly. That's not the right attitude to have. And we're going to get into that in a second. But I think going back to really quick, I was going to make some sort of joke, but now the time passed. That's why I was going to interject. I was so excited.
I know. I just know myself, and
Yeah, I get it.
I have to finish that thought or it's going to
Yeah.
be bad.
And honestly, you finishing that thought was a lot more, provided a lot more actual content or good content than my stupid joke would have been, even though I already forget
I
it.
have faith it would have been somewhat funny.
But yeah, I think we hear it so much, right? From, like I said, well-meaning relatives, from marriage books, from Christian perspectives, that idea of
Yeah.
like, never go to bed angry. Like that's a vow that we made, or that's something that we resolved to do. It's just like, hey, we never go to bed angry, that we almost feel like we're doing something wrong. I know that's the case for me. Like I remember like the first time we ever was like, hey, we're both exhausted. Let's go to bed and let's pick this up tomorrow morning. I was like, ugh, that's almost feels sinful or wrong. Maybe not sinful, but just like, oh, we're not doing marriage right. But in reality, a lot of times that can be like the best step to actually reaching resolution. So let's dive into that piece here of like, why is that not the best advice to say like, okay, it's super late. Hey, we could go to sleep and pick this up later, or we can hash it out right now. Why does hashing it out right now often backfire?
Yeah. I mean, most people would attest that exhaustion brings out the worst in you, that it is going to lead you to say things that you don't mean. It is going to probably have you just pick fights that you wouldn't pick with a rested mind, in the sense like, yeah, I just feel like tact goes out the window when you're exhausted a lot of times, and that's not helpful for conflict resolution.
Yeah, I was just going to add on
something.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add on. You're so right with that. We talked a lot about in seminary, like the acronym HALT. Like you are more likely, like you need to be more on guard because you are more likely to fall into sinful behaviors or sinful tendencies when you are hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So
Yeah.
that idea of like those four, again, they don't excuse sinful behaviors, but it's just like be extra on guard when you are feeling one of those four things because you are more likely to succumb to sin when those. And so like
Yeah.
you're right with the
Right.
tired
Tired.
piece.
Yeah. I would say if you reach resolution because you're under the pressure of bedtime is coming, we want to go to sleep, so we're going to resolve this. It's usually just like somebody throws up the white flag and it's
Mm,
not true resolution.
yeah, that's
Like
good.
you are, yeah, basically just making concessions. That's maybe not the right word, but like you are compromising what you would normally flesh out more thoroughly and have a more fruitful conversation around because it's like, I'm tired. You know what? Actually, maybe I don't care anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, I'm over it. Yep, you're right. I agree. Fine. Let's just
Right.
move on and go to bed.
Yeah. And I mean, this kind of in the vein of exhaustion bringing out the worst in you. It's like you are typically not going to be the most emotionally regulated. You're not going to be the most empathetic. You're not going to be the most gentle. Like your fruit of the spirit is likely suppressed when you are exhausted. And if you are in a conflict, especially a heated conflict, you are even more exhausted because have been in this elevated state. All things just physiologically and spiritually and emotionally, all the ways you are just in a worse place to have a conversation. So it is likely going to backfire. And if this becomes a routine habit where you're so worried about resolving conflict before you go to bed, you're going to create this habit of conflict needs to be rushed. And again, you're going to have made compromises that you wouldn't normally have made. You're not actually going to see things through. This kind of just ties into so many different episodes that we've done and concepts that we talk about like fruitful conflict resolution.
Hmm,
That's just not happening if
yeah.
you are rushing conflict resolution in order to beat the clock.
Yeah, and I think that brings up like the last point, and this is kind of tied into your second point too, but that idea that you are almost training yourself
Yeah.
that resolution can be rushed. It can just be something that, oh, we just got to get it done instead of really digging deeper and getting to the root of the problem of like, hey, we need to truly address this versus, hey, we just need to get to a point where we both feel good about going to bed,
Yeah.
and that doesn't actually solve any deep-seated problems. And so giving yourself the time and energy it deserves to actually get those places is very, very important. And then that brings us into, okay, so, what do we do instead? And I think the first thing, and this is what was so important for me, is recognize that going to sleep or going to bed and getting some rest does not mean that you are abandoning the conversation. It does not mean that we are ending here and we are just moving on. What it does mean is that we are unresolved and we are resetting and having this conversation at a set date. And so, one of the important pieces is recognizing that you were just pausing the conversation. But truly, to be truly just pausing it, you need to have a set time where you are picking it back up. So it's like, hey, we're both exhausted. I love you. We're on the same team. We don't need to keep, beating a dead horse or running into a brick wall. Let's go to bed. Let's get some rest and let's pick this up tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. or tomorrow's a crazy day. Let's pick it up tomorrow night at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. after the kids go to sleep. And like, let's put it on the calendar right now to pick back up this conversation. And so
Mhm.
I think that, just having those little phrases of, hey, I love you. We're on the same team. That's part of our conflict resolution plan.
Mhm.
We're not reaching resolution right now, but let's go to sleep and pick this up at X time tomorrow.
I would say the ideal end state, if it's the ideal plan B end state, like
Yeah.
if you're not able to get to the actual ideal end state prior to bedtime, the second ideal is both of you feel good about delaying.
Yeah.
Like you're both, it doesn't feel like one person is just like, okay, we're going to wait till tomorrow. And the other person really wants to have the conversation. I think
Mhm.
you get to a point where you mutually agree. Obviously, it's ideal. It doesn't always work this way. But ideally, you are both like, you're right. Or like, we're right about this decision to sleep on it and to have the conversation in the morning. Good night. I love you.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to part of that is still follow your conflict resolution plan. Like for us, we've talked about it in prior episodes, but the first two steps of ours is to stop and to pray and to look each other in the eyes and to remind yourself or to remind each other that you're on the same team. Of like, hey, let's pray. You pray. You look at each other's eyes, hey, we're on the same team. I love you. Let's get some sleep and let's revisit this tomorrow. Because again, I think the whole idea of, this Ephesians passage is that it's, hey, we're not going to have bitterness or contempt when we go to bed. That doesn't mean we have to have every detail hammered out of the conversation. And so you need to get to a place where you don't have this like, oh, I'm just so angry, I just need to go to bed right now, and everything like that. That you don't want to go to bed in that state of mind either. It's like,
It's
no,
just avoidant. Yeah.
that's just avoidant of like, okay, no, let's reduce the tension. Let's remind each other that we love each other, and let's go to bed having established when we're going to have the conversation. And I think that gets at the heart of that Ephesians 4 passage, and it's really following that quite well, in fact. And so that's what I would say is just those are the important pieces that you need to do of like, hey, you don't have that bitterness or contempt, and you can feel it. Like, I know for us, when we've been in disagreements before, like we're laying right next to each other and I feel like we're like physically it's hard to describe, but I truly feel like we're a mile apart where I just feel the tension in the air. I feel the separateness almost, even though we're physically right next to each other. And I think it's important that you don't go to bed in that state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I am trying to think, how would we wrap it up? Because I feel like that is how we would handle it.
Yeah. If like, okay, so what do we do instead? It's like, okay, you follow
Establish
those
the
first
time.
two. You stop, you pray, you look at each other's eyes, you remind each other you're on the same team, that you love each other. You establish a specific time of, hey, let's revisit this at this time. You put it on the calendar. And then that's
Calendar.
also why it's helpful to have the weekly marriage meeting too, because
Oh,
then
there it is.
no,
That
but
was not planned.
that
I was
wasn't.
not trying to tee you up.
But I'm saying of like,
Yeah,
in
that's
our
true.
weekly marriage meeting, we have that question, is there any conflict left unresolved? And I even remember like there was a slight thing that in the one we did this past Sunday that I brought up of like, hey, I really didn't appreciate this. And I just feel like we never were able to flesh it out because we were camping and, all this kind of stuff. So we never really got to talk about it in greater detail. But if you have your weekly marriage meeting, you know that even if your fight or disagreement is on Monday, the longest you're going to go is 6 days before you can address it. Like you can be kind, you can be loving, and the goal isn't to wait that full 6 days, but at least at like absolute worst case scenario, it's going to get addressed within a week. And again, not to just pump the weekly marriage meeting, but it is so helpful to have that framework so that it's like, even if there is a little bit of unresolved conflict, we know we're going to get to it. We know we're going to address it in our weekly marriage meeting. If we can't get to it before then, like our week is just packed or one of us is traveling or whatever it may be, we know we're going to have our weekly marriage meeting where we can address it. And I think that's just so important.
Yeah, I agree. My only other thing I'd add is like, even practically speaking, keeping a note or like a note to yourself if there is something that feels unresolved. Because I think sometimes sometimes in practice, when you get to that question in the weekly marriage meeting, if it's not something you've been thinking about, but you think that it could be fruitful to have that conversation to avoid it for the next time, you might not remember that you were bothered by it until it comes up again. And so I'm not saying like keep a record of wrongs in your notes app, but like, I don't know. I just know that sometimes it comes when you're a parent or you're tired and you get to that Sunday meeting, you just don't even remember what the week held. We literally have to go through our calendar to rehash what our high, low, and buffalo of the week was because we forget what the week was. So, and Monday, anytime I have a meeting on a Monday, people will be like, how was your weekend? I'm like, good. I genuinely am always like, I just don't remember what I did. So anyway, that's all I got for you.
1 degree shift. Go to bed angry. I'm just kidding.
No, I think, it's just, go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say the next time this happens, reaching that state of like, we're not in agreement right now, but let's seek to have this conversation in the morning. And even if that means setting your alarm 20 minutes earlier to have that conversation after coffee, whatever that looks like.
And again, I can't highlight this enough, but it's not avoidance, right? And that's the last thing. It's not, hey, this conversation is closed, it's done, let's just forget about it and move on. That's not the heart posture we want to take. It's like, hey, no, we want to go to bed in a loving state in the fact that we haven't reached resolution. but we've prayed together. We've reminded each other we're on the same team. We know that we love each other, and then we've set the time to have the conversation. And I think that having that can be way more fruitful and is far more at the heart of what Ephesians 4 is trying to get at than it's like, oh, we have to have everything resolved by the time we go to bed and it's 11:37 and we aren't reaching resolution and we're just growing more bitter and more tired and more angry, and then you just end up going to bed angrier than you would have been if you had just stopped and prayed, reminded each other you're on the same team and that you love each other, and set a specific time to have that conversation later.
Yeah. If I were trying to come up with a quippy one-liner, I would say it's not avoidance, it's stewardship.
Oh, there you go.
Because, yeah, you're stewarding. I think you are stewarding your relationship and each other well when you make that decision. I'm being tongue-in-cheek, but also I'm serious.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
All right. Catch you next week, 1 Degree fam.
Love you, fam.
Thanks for tuning in for this episode of the 1 Degree Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'd be so appreciative if you take just a few seconds to leave a rating and a quick review. We love to hear your feedback, and those ratings really do help make it easier for others to find this podcast.
And if you want to continue this chat or share your takeaways, we'd love to hear from you. Head on over to our Instagram at the 1 Degree Podcast and leave a comment or send us a DM. We can't wait to hear from you. Catch you next week, 1 Degree fam.